Hey, what's up guys, TechTitan here and I'm back again with a brand new video. So before I begin, as always, I want to thank you all so much for watching. If you're new to the channel, don't be a stranger, make sure you leave a thumbs up and also make sure you subscribe to the channel. So with that being said, I'm finally doing my Samsung Galaxy A16 5G's camera review. And I'm just going to be straight up and straightforward with you guys. This is as basic of a camera as it gets. So it's not necessarily meant to impress you in any way, shape, or form. However, it does the basic jobs and it does them basic. So let me go ahead and paint the picture to you guys and hopefully explain this to the best of my ability. So let's go ahead and get started and we're going to begin and talk about the specs of this camera. And so you get a pretty similar setup to last year's generation. You have a triple camera setup with your main sensor being a 50 megapixel f1.8 aperture. You also have a 5 megapixel f2.2 ultra wide sensor and a 2 megapixel macro sensor. Now, it does have the ability to shoot only at 1080p at 30 frames per second with no optical image stabilization. It does use the gyro electronic image stabilization for videos, so you're missing that. You do also get a 13 megapixel front-facing camera with the same kind of raindrop notch that I feel like a lot of people are not a big fan of at this point in time, but that's just a conversation for another day. And it does shoot at 1080p at, again, 30 frames per second. So I also want to transition and speak a little bit about the camera interface itself. It's just what you would expect from Samsung. If you're familiar with the Samsung phone and how the camera interface is, so it's basically, you're right at home. It's the same Samsung interface that you would expect from pretty much all their devices nowadays. Switching between the main sensor and the wide angle is a little bit on the sluggish side. However, it wasn't like frustrating, or it didn't really bother me as much as I thought it was going to bother me. So I got used to it. Just take that extra second to take your pictures. And it does also give you the option to go for Pro mode, which lets you mess with the exposure, the ISO, gives you a little bit more control over pictures. So if you want to mess with that, you can. However, I feel like it's not going to really do you much just because of the actual quality of this camera. So speaking of which, let's go ahead and transition and speak a little bit on the image quality of the Galaxy A16 5G. So one of the main things that I noticed about this phone is because of its lack of image stabilization, you'd really have to hold your hand super steady to take some proper pictures. And when you do take some proper pictures, it lacks colors, it lacks proper exposure. I'm not saying that it's absolutely horrible or you cannot use it at all. It still is usable, but in some situations I feel like it's just the colors are washed out, a little bit underexposed, and they don't pop, they don't give you that Samsung saturation that we're all accustomed to having. And it does give you some cooler colors. The ultra wide in some scenarios is pretty decent. In other scenarios, as you guys will see later on, is absolutely horrible, but it's there and it's fun to use. So another point that I want to kind of bring up is that in some scenario the pictures look darker than it actually should. Now I do know that it's a little bit cloudy, but I feel like there should be a slightly more brighter pictures. And by default, by the way, this phone does show it at 12 megapixels. If you want, you can switch it to the 50 megapixels to kind of gain more detail. But still, it has a pretty solid detail for its quality that it's bringing. And dynamic range under proper sunlight conditions is fine. It's very usable. In other situations, again, the problem with darkening the picture, it's not all that impressive. So for example, this tree in particular, it's super dark, almost kind of black at this point, and it doesn't really show you any detail. Similar situation here. The picture is a little bit darker than I would like it to be, and you know, again, it lacks color, and so that's something to also keep in mind and notice. I want to say that this camera is better than the previous generation. I kind of can argue both ways, that in some scenarios it's better, in other scenarios it's worse. So keep that in mind if you're actually thinking about upgrading from the Galaxy A15 5G. And if we move on to sort of lower light conditions, it becomes even worse. So the noise is absolutely ridiculous. So this one is basically decent because there's still like kind of lights outside, but this one is completely dark. There's no night mode on here, and the wide angle almost looks kind of cartoony. It's basically non-usable. The front-facing camera, however, is actually better in my opinion than the previous generation by a mile. So the next segment is basically just for fun. I wanted to compare the iPhone 16 Pro Max to the Galaxy A16 5G and see how far off we are in picture quality. And yeah, it's a big gap, right? So the colors are clearly better on the iPhone, and even in the next picture, in which it clearly shows that the A16 does have the darker, lesser detail, lesser quality picture. With that being said, I mean, let's go ahead and shift the conversation to the video quality. Again, like I mentioned, it does shoot 1080p at 30 frames per second, so no 4K video or no high resolution video whatsoever, no OIS, so don't expect nothing too much. Watch the video and we'll get back with some final words. Hey, what's up guys, Techtine here, and this is your video sample of the Samsung Galaxy A16 5G. Now this phone relies a lot on kind of processed image stabilization or electronic image stabilization, so it doesn't have physical OIS, which means that it's not going to be as stable as a lot of phones that you see. Now the video is, again, it's just basic. It only shoots at 1080p. There's no 4K video or anything like that. And you can, in fact, switch between your main sensor and your wide-angle sensor when shooting video. So that, I guess, is kind of cool or kind of useful. But yeah, this is basically the video capability of the Galaxy A16. And you can actually switch between your front-facing and your back-facing camera all seamlessly. So I guess, in a way, that's actually pretty good in the software department from Samsung. I wish it was just a more powerful video, and even like the front-facing camera seems to be pretty decent. I think in some scenarios it actually can be useful. So that's the A16's camera video capability. We're out. So to basically summarize this whole camera review, I can tell you three things. First, this is not going to be the most impressive camera at this price point, unfortunately. Two, if you have the Galaxy A15 from the previous generation, then don't upgrade strictly for the camera. And the third thing that I want to speak on this camera is that it still meets all your basic needs. However, as I stated, if you're buying this phone strictly for the camera, I would look somewhere else. But if you're looking at it as a kind of a complete package with the camera that it brings, I think you'll be fine, right? So with that being said, if you do have this phone, let me know in the comments below, how do you feel about the camera quality? Do you like it? Do you hate it? If you found this video useful, make sure you leave a thumbs up. If you have any questions or if I missed anything, let me know in the comments. I mean, I'll address anything that I missed. So with that being said, thank you all so much for watching, and I will most definitely catch you guys in the next video. I appreciate you all for watching.